Ukraine's strategy to boost its dwindling forces and address its demographic crisis takes a sharp turn with a controversial push to send its refugees back home. According to El País, Kyiv is now advocating for EU countries to reduce aid to Ukrainian refugees, hoping that this will force them to return. In an even bolder move, Ukraine is also seeking to deprive men of military age of consular services in Europe, using this as leverage to bring back its citizens. This drastic shift comes as the war, which started in 2022, has led to one of the largest waves of displacement in Europe since World War II. Nearly 10 million Ukrainians have fled the country, with estimates of between 6 and 10 million still living abroad, as reported by El País. As the war persists, Ukraine's government is not only struggling with military losses, but also with an ever-deepening demographic crisis. Already facing a population shortage before the conflict, Ukraine is now experiencing alarming population decline, pushing Kyiv to explore new and controversial measures. President Volodymyr Zelensky has made it clear that repatriating Ukrainians is essential for the country's recovery. As part of his resilience plan, Zelensky introduced the Ministry of National Unity, tasked with managing this repatriation effort. The new ministry, born out of a reshuffling of the Ministry for Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories, is now at the forefront of a mission to reverse Ukraine's demographic decline. But as El País reports, the government's plans are vague and largely undefined. Sociologist Olga Pishulina from the Razumkov think tank pointed out the lack of clear mechanisms for encouraging the return of Ukrainians. Nobody knows how this will be done, she says, as both Ukrainians and the government struggle to outline concrete steps. Even Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Chernyshov's estimate of 10 million returnees seems overly optimistic given the grim realities many face. According to UNHCR, almost 6.7 million Ukrainians remain abroad, while economists like Volodymyr Landa suggest the actual figure could be closer to 5 million. While Kyiv's push for a return of its people seems essential for the country's rebuilding efforts, it faces significant hurdles. Security remains a paramount concern, with daily bombings still a constant threat. El País reveals that Kyiv is considering various strategies, including cuts to refugee aid in EU nations and even barring military-age men from accessing consular services. These aggressive tactics are meant to pressurize the refugees into returning, but many remain unconvinced. While 1.2 million refugees have returned to Ukraine for at least 3 months, the question of whether they will stay is still up in the air. El País highlights the stark difference in return intentions between those who fled the war and economic migrants who left Ukraine before the conflict. The former are more likely to want to return once conditions improve, with 61% of refugees still hopeful about going back. But even with all these numbers, the government cannot ignore the ticking clock. The post-war recovery will demand a staggering $411 billion, far exceeding the pre-war GDP. However, the government's efforts are stymied by an undeniable reality. Ukraine's population is in freefall. Reportedly, Ukraine has become the world leader in population decline, with a population drop from 49 million in 2001 to an estimated 31 million in 2023. This is compounded by a negative birth rate, with deaths far exceeding births. 250,970 deaths versus 87,500 births so far this year. Time is running out for Ukraine to get its citizens back, and the longer the war drags on, the less likely many refugees will return.